Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, I would like you all to give a warm welcome to our main speaker, Bob F.
Hi, I'm Bob Fisher. I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to God in AA for my life and sobriety today, and I'm a member of the Unity Service and Recovery Group in Northridge in the San Fernando Valley, and I'm sober 13 years, 7 months, and 16 days. For that, I'm grateful. No, don't clap for me. No. Yeah. So when I was new, I thought time was important. I found out that time isn't that very important. You know, unfortunately, a lot of good friends had to prove to me that time doesn't mean that much. You know, what means much is how we live today, and I had a great day today, good day today. I didn't even work today. Nice day. I'm sorry that we have a speaker because, quite frankly, I thought the best fun we were having was at that coffee break. You guys were wonderful, you know, and you're good alcoholics because the leader asked you to stop like 10 minutes before you did. You know, you're my kind of group, you know. I felt like I was at a lease-breaking party. I was told, Mike told me that this was the end of your stay here at the Hacienda, and I was part of the lease breaking because I went for the coffee pot and I pulled the handle and the handle came with me and the coffee kept flowing. If this wasn't your last meeting, I guarantee it was going to be. You know, you're done. It's nice to be here. I'm from the East Coast, born in New Jersey, raised in the New York area. From an Irish family, all my grandparents came from Ireland. Early on, I fell in love with saloons. I was my father's and my grandfather's excuse to drink on weekends when their respective wives didn't like them going out. So my grandfather would tell outrageous lies to his wife, my grandmother, by telling her that he'd show me Central Park. I visited that man probably 50 times. I don't think I ever saw Central Park. But I did see the east side of the 80s, you know, and the East 80s, and all his friends were over there, and we'd go to those saloons. God, I love those saloons. They smelled good, you know. God, they were one. You know, and there was shuffleboard and free lunch. This is back in late 30s, you know, before World War II. And they'd give a guy like me a little beer, you know, and a big bowl of pretzels. And I said, geez, you know, when I grow up, I'm going to get a hammock and just live here, you know. I mean, you could eat, drink, sleep, listen to singing and arguments all at the same time, you know. This was long before TV, of course. And my kids say it's long before radio, you know, but that's immaterial. I love the saloons. I had the opportunity to go to Notre Dame, and I went there in 1952, and my brother had gone there in 46, and I knew about the drinking laws at Notre Dame, and you couldn't drink till you were 21, and that wasn't going to happen until I was a senior. And if you get caught, you got thrown out of school. So we used to drink down at the Studebaker plant, and what's nice about this crowd is most of you are old enough to know what a Studebaker is, you know. Great saloons down there by the plant, you know. You'd walk in, and in South Bend there'd be a package store, you know, where the guys get their pints, their miniatures, you know, and then you go into the bar, and then on the left there'd be the shuffleboard. God, I love shuffleboard, you know. And I don't mean Leisure Village shuffleboard. I'm talking about bar shuffleboard. Yeah. Then in the back there'd be ham, you know, and good Polish ham and rye bread, and then those eggs that used to be living, those green eggs, remember, in the brine, you know. Dr. Seuss got his book from that, Green Eggs. And I was a blackout drinker, so I hope to God what I tell you next is true, but I hope to God I never ate one of those pickled pig's feet. I mean, when my father said anyone east of the Hudson was a heathen, I knew what he meant. I mean, you got to be sick to eat those things, you know, and I hope that's one of my yets, you know. I love drinking, and because of that, I was hired as a salesman. I worked for this company for 4 summers, back where I lived in Jersey, and that last summer, just before my senior year, the sales manager came down and says, Fish, he said, I understand you want to be a salesman. I said, that's right. He said, well, how come you haven't applied with us? I said, well, Ken, I don't qualify here. You guys only hire people who've sold before or people who are married, and I don't fit that category. And he said, well, we've known you for 4 years, for God's sakes. He says, you're a known commodity. He said, when are you going to be 21? And I said, February. He said, have you ever been home at Easter? And I said, no, never. He said, I'll fly you back home from school. I'll pay the expenses, and I'll give you a test. If you pass the test, I'll make you an offer. And even if you flunk the test, at least you'll have a free weekend visiting your family. Would that be all right with you? And I said, hell yeah, I'd love that. So sure enough, I got the tickets and flew back at Easter, and he met me. And the plant was in Teterboro, New Jersey, but rather than going to the plant, we went to this wonderful saloon, Bill Odom's saloon restaurant. We went in the bar. You know, we had about 6 highballs, and we talked about Notre Dame the next year, football, and the Brooklyn Dodgers, where they're going to stay, that kind of stuff. That's all we talked, was bar talking. And we started going out to eat, and he says, Fish, he says, I hope you take my offer. I said, well, Ken, when do I take the test? He said, you just did, He said, this job requires a lot of drinking. You're as sober as I am. We need you, I became the most dedicated employee that company ever had. I took you to lunch whether you were with me or not, which makes your ninth step expensive, that's all, Pay now, pay later, how do you know, God, I love drinking. People said, a lot of people say, were you born an alcoholic, and how do I know? I don't know nothing about that. I know my brother and sister most likely are not alcoholic. They certainly don't seem to be anything like me. And I don't know about my mothers, I don't think so. Maybe my father, but when were you? I don't know. I know nothing about that. But I know that as long as you're the last one to get drunk at a party, whether it be at home or work or whatever, if you're the last one to get drunk, you don't have a drinking problem. The only people who have drinking problems are the ones who get drunk first. That's the one we all talk about. Those are the ones we talk about. And if I had a drinking problem, I had enough capacity where it didn't seem to cause a lot of grief. Where I drove most people home, and when I got into trouble, I still had a sense of humor enough to shuffle out of the way. And that existed for a few years. And met my wife through drinking. She was the first girl I met who ever drank like I did. I used to date girls who, in those days, girls who didn't drink would politely order a green cream de mint frappe, or a frozen daiquiri, for God's sake, and they'd sip on that drink all night, They were boring. They either had green tongues or cold lips, And I was selling upstate New York. I had gone with this company, and I was selling upstate New York, and I was teaching. There were guys who lived in my apartment house. They're all newly married, and these guys, some of them in their 30s, had a real serious social defect. These men did not know how to play shuffleboard in a bar. And so I felt duty-bound to teach them. I cost them a little bit of money, but I taught them how to play it, But their wives didn't like when we got home. They didn't like the hour or the condition of their husbands, So their goal was to get me married. Could have been to anyone. Didn't matter. They just wanted to, because in the 50s, you got somebody married, they'd settle down. That was the thinking, I guess, but it didn't work. But that was the material. But they fixed me up with Ellen, and she looked like a frozen daiquiri, tall, willowy brunette, She looked like a frozen daiquiri. And that time I was living in Binghamton, New York, the southern tier of upstate New York, and I take him to the Carlton Hotel because the bartender there was a free pourer. I love free pour bartenders. And they had great hors d'oeuvres, free hors d'oeuvres. I'd invite them to dinner and the movies. And I'd take them to the Carlton. They'd have their frozen daiquiri. I'd fill them up on the free hors d'oeuvres. They'd be too full to eat. And I'd take them to the movies and save money and take them home. That was the way it went, boring one-drink women. And I got there with it. There are guys I know in AA who married non-drinkers. They regret it to this day. They can't imagine anyone marrying a non-drinker. I just can't imagine it. You can't be that cheap, that young. You just can't be, But anyway, so I got there with Ellen, and she looked like a daiquiri, but she ordered a scotch, and my left ear began to wiggle a little, By the third round, my wife was even with me, and I was in lust, let me tell you. We got married within a year, There were other reasons we got married, but that was I was raised. Really, when all is said and done, you never trusted a man who didn't drink. If you didn't trust a man who didn't drink, why in the name of God would you trust and marry a woman who didn't drink? I just couldn't imagine that. And we had a lot of fun behind drinking. Did a lot of traveling. I was traveling salesman up and down the East Coast at that time. And we started having children. And she started slowing down. And but she always could. She could just slow down whenever she wanted to. And I never had that capability. And And that's what slowly but surely got me. I was starting to become not the first one to get drunk, but now I'm in the middle of the pack, you know. And then I become the first to get drunk. And I didn't take any geographics. Claire and I were talking earlier about geographics. I didn't have to. My company moved me every 2 years. I never went anywhere, you know. But as I did my inventory, it dawned on me, you know, truthfully, that I had moved just about the right nick of time. You know, I couldn't have stayed in an area much longer than that. I didn't have little blocks or streets. I had 2 or 3 states. And when you wear your welcome out in 2 or 3 states, you know you're not being very good, you know. But life existed, and I switched companies halfway through this, and eventually came out here to the West Coast as manager of big company, big chemical company. I was a small division, but I was the manager, and it's something I always wanted to do. But by now, a dramatic thing has happened in my life, and it has nothing to do with drinking. At least I didn't think at the time. I had lost my love of life. I no longer had a love of life. No more zest for living. And I did. God, I loved life. I didn't hear the same tune that you heard, but I love life. I love travel. I like business. I like meeting people. I like new, exciting things. And business did that for me, and travel did that for me. And I found life exciting. But it wasn't that way anymore. Here I was with the whole West Coast and Alaska and Hawaii, and you know, that should be exciting, but it wasn't. And it was taking all the courage I had just to get dressed, and I didn't know why. And I was fearful, not that I was ever brave, but I was never fearful of getting dressed or fearful of going out the door, but I couldn't do that. And I was full of hate and venom, and I wasn't that kind of a guy. I'd just brush you off if I didn't like you, but now I'm full of venom, and I use sarcasm, and I'm burning bridges in all directions. And you know, there isn't much going on, and life's rotten, you know, and I'm convinced that this is maturity. This is what maturity is. Maybe this is truly what being an adult is. Unfortunately, I got into AA, and Hugh Douglas, God rest his soul, said that alcoholics were the only group of people he knew in the world who went from puberty to senility and never passed adulthood, you know, just bounced, you know, right through it, you know. And I hated him, but he described me, you know, God. At any rate, the company demotes me. After about 5 years here, the company demotes me because I'm so weird and I'm just not even pleasant to be around. They figured it's managing people, I guess, at that time. So they found another job for me as technical manager. I couldn't do that, and I was caught getting all kinds of grief. And my drinking was worse, and I couldn't hide it anymore from anybody. And they bounced me back to salesman, and sure that I would quit, but hell, that was the best thing for me. Salesman, I could hide out again. I could cover 2 or 3 states and stay a mile ahead of people. And that's what I did for the next few years. But the venom, the hate, and all the pain just stayed with me, you know. And I had tried these last 4 or 5 years of my drinking to slow down. I never knew. I was in 6 months in AA, and I still didn't believe it was the first drink. You know, I knew there was some number, some magic elixir that I had lost, because I had never prayed to stop drinking or to have me stop drinking. But I prayed quite often in that last few years to get my drinking back to the way it was. Back when I was younger, and it didn't cause me any grief, you know, and I could just do things with impunity. It was just leaving me, and I just, it wasn't there, you know. And God, I was just a mess, you know. And Ellen, my wife, and I, we were living together still in the same house, but truly not, you know. And show you how sick she is and why she's so active in Al-Anon. We were married at that point when I got sober 21 and a half years. And she was waiting until our 25th wedding anniversary. She was going to divorce me the day of our 25th wedding anniversary because our youngest child was going to be 18. And she thought, what a great day to throw his Irish butt out of the house. You know, so she was willing to live with me another 3.5 years, you know. And actually, it's a shame, too, because my wife was homicidal, not suicidal. So I was lucky that I did get sober, let me tell you. She had visions of pillowing me to death, you know, and she had taken, she had taken courses in sleep apnea, you know, and I had been recorded as a heavy snorer, so she was just going to make me a pillow sandwich, you know. Don't laugh. To this day, my group knows that if I die suddenly, I want my lungs checked, you know. I don't, you know. Anyway, I had a boss who was a non-drinker, and through the grace of God, my drinking kept bothering him, and a decent human being, and our office was in Burbank, and I could never understand it. Whenever he wanted to talk to me about drinking, which seemingly was every 6 months, it wasn't, but it was some period of time that would follow some rapidity. He'd have it at the Universal Shirt, and he'd rent a daytime room to talk to me about drinking, and I'd give him a lot of smoke and all kinds of different answers and whatnot, and I'd always escape, you know, And I couldn't see why this guy was wasting good money. He was wasting $73 on a daytime room with the shirt. And you know, $73 if you had that money in your pocket, you went to Thrifty's, you could get 12 half gallons of gin. Now that's a waste of important resources. You know, I mean, it really was, didn't it? But fortunately for me, I started a drunk story that was, you know, and I was starring in way too many, but this last one, at least to pray to God, it was my last one. It was down here in L.A., over in downtown at a microfilm show. And by now, because I'm causing a lot of grief even with people I drink with, no one wants to really be around me, so I'm forced now to drink with squealers. And that's about as low as you can get, you know. You don't ever want to drink with squealers. And this guy was a known squealer. And he and I were plastered. We tried to finish all the gin in L.A., and we didn't get very far, you know. Gin does that to you, you know. And I shouldn't have been driving, and normally I didn't. Normally I'd throw my keys to people, but somehow I wound up driving, and everything I tell you now was told to me because I was in a blackout. But the customer's in the back seat, the other guy from our company was in the front seat with me, and I'm taking him back towards Park La Brea, and I'm showing this guy from our company in the front seat. I guess I want to show him L.A. up close, so I'm on Wilshire going towards Vermont, and I'm driving on a sidewalk, you know. I didn't know that, but it doesn't matter. You know, we were close to the stores, and my customer kept striking his chest, you know, and I'm yelling manja. Now, what to eat an Italian does to a guy striking his chest, I don't know. Maybe I thought he had indigestion. I don't know. But the guy from our company says, pull over, and I guess I did, and I went back off on the curb, and he grabbed the keys, and he said, stay where you are, and, you know, and he called a cab, and he took the guy over to that French hospital over on Beverly, and fortunately, the customer only had gas and fear, no heart attack, you know. But the squealer took his own cab home. He didn't go home with me, you know. I knew he was going to squeal, you know, and people talk about the promenade here in Santa Monica. It used to be a sewer when I drank there, you know, that 3rd Street sewer. And I loved that sewer. I felt good there. And me and one of my customer buddies were in that sewer that next day and I couldn't get drunk that day. And I knew I was in trouble. The house was in foreclosure for the 5th time. And I hadn't paid taxes in 2 years, which is no big deal for an alcoholic, but they owed me money. I just couldn't fill out paperwork, you know, and it was terrible. And a day later, John calls me into the Universal Sheraton. And he says, Fish, I brought you here under false pretenses. And he said, I've learned from people who know better than me, there's nothing I can tell you about drinking. He says, I'm going to go back to the office. He says, but please, just stop your Irish BS and just listen to this guy. You know, a decent human being. Just a decent human being, only wanted the best for me. And I could see that now, finally, you know. And off he went, almost in tears. But I'm scared, you know, because I don't want to lose that job. I'm spending a lot more than I'm earning, but at least I know how to sky checks, and I'm kiting them pretty well, you know. And we're using butter on the numbers, and I was still working back in '81. And it was all kinds of ways, but I was in deep trouble, and I had to get the house out of foreclosure, and there's a knock on the door. I open it up with fear, and this guy says, hi, I'm Frank, I'm an alcoholic. My first thought was the poor son of a bitch. You know, Jesus, you know. Because I'd admit freely to being an Irish drunk, but certainly not an alcoholic. I knew one thing. I didn't know anything about AA or any of that crap. But I knew that if you admitted to being an alcoholic, that meant you could never drink ever again for the rest of your life. And that made no sense to me at all. You know, I couldn't. And so I tried to help this guy to his chair. And he's in a suit and tie, and he looks good. And I'm still wearing knits, you know, with those holes in them. Remember those knit clothes? And I smelled bad. Gin used to exude from my skin in weird places. And I take showers 2-3 times a day, but that didn't work, so I'd use cheap aftershave, and the combination of old gin and cheap aftershave, I smelled like Secaucus, New Jersey on a muggy day, you know, just, terrible. Is there an alarm that goes with this, by the way? There isn't? Can't we set I think I'll set the, oh, okay, I'll set it. And, from a distance, looked like I had a ruddy complexion, because, you know, but up close you'd see there were 80 million broken blood vessels from dye heaving, you know, the Irish sin of a light complexion, you know. And God gifted me with furrows in my brow here, because that's what I was seeing out of. I couldn't see out of my eyes, and I'm still shaking bad. And here I am trying to help him to his chair, and Frank doesn't do what anyone else does. He starts telling me about himself, and I don't know the word identify, but I'm beginning to identify with this guy, in the sense that I know that he and I have taken the same path, and that he and I have drank pretty much the same way, and did everything alike. And even to the problems we're into now, and what he was going through. And I said, whoa, wait a second, Frank. I said, I know what you're telling me, and I appreciate what you're saying. I said, but I can't be like you. I can't join AA. He said, I didn't ask you to join AA. He says, but why wouldn't you want to give it a try? I said, Frank, what do my friends say? And he says, Fish, you don't have any, you know. Hurts when they're so right, you know. Frank, what do my neighbors say? He said, they'll be happy to get you off the lawn, you know. And I didn't know how he knew. I thought he had moved in next door, you know, because I used to like to, on weekends, Ellen was always ragging on me about drinking, but on weekends she couldn't rag because I'd go through the morning routine and then I'd go out to the garage and I'd open the freezer and I'd take the gin out and pour my slushy, you know. Long before 7-Eleven, I had a slushy. You know, I'd pour out that gin into a big glass and I'd pick a weeding tool and I'd go out in the front yard and weed. Now, no difference whether you're drinking a beer or a slushy, what the hell does it matter, you know? Trouble is when you drink gin like that, you sleep a lot. You know, so I'd sleep on the lawn. And I had one neighbor who was convinced that I was the only microscopic weeder in Northridge. You know? At any rate, he said, look, Fish, there's nothing to do about AA. It's what's worked for me, and I believe it's what's going to work for you. He says, but you're incapable of making a decision. He said, I don't want you to make that kind of a decision. He said, it's too important for you to make the way you are now. You're adult. He said, you can't stop your hands from shaking, but when you do, your head starts shaking. He says, you're in tough shape, man. You've bought the ticket. He said, what you got to do is dry out. Get that brain a little bit less feeble, and maybe then you can make a decision, but I'm not going to make it for you, but you got to make it, but you got to dry out first. And then he went on, through the grace of God, I agreed to dry out at a place up north, up in Napa Valley. A friend of his by the name of Gene Duffy. Guy just died last year. But when I went up there, it was in northern end of California, up in the Napa Valley. And this guy had 26 years sobriety. It was 3 meetings a day and 3 meals. 3 meetings and 3 meals. And you could skip the meals, but if you skipped the meetings, you went out, you know. This guy was a big old tough Irishman, you know. I liked it. But there's something about him I hope to God I never forget. Because, you know, I want no part of AA. Early on, people said, you know, Fish, you're lucky. You know, you're going to love AA. I said, why would I love AA, for God's sakes? He says, well, you're a salesman, and salesmen love people, and AA is loaded with lots of good people. I said, where'd you hear the crap that salesmen like people, for God's sake? I don't like people. Ministers and teachers like people. Salesmen don't like people. People who go to the same place day in and day out, same job, they like people. I don't like people. I like not being with anybody. The only group I like is a group of me. I don't want AA. What is this crap? You know, I'll do anything other than go to AA. And this damn guy Duffy, you know, he had this look on his face. And I hope to God I never forget it, because what he had on his face was something that I wanted. I didn't want his job, I didn't want his business, I didn't want his wife or his car, but I wanted what he had on his face. This guy had on his face the love of life. He had the zest for living. That's what I wanted back. I wanted that back. I'd do anything to get that back, just to enjoy life. And he said that's the only way he got it was going AA. Oh, crap, is there something behind door 3? You know, there's got to be something other than AA. I don't want AA, you know. Then he said something else that got me. He said that AA was not a place to get sober. And I'm saying to myself, why the hell am I here then? He said, no, AA is a place where you learn to live sober. Wow. He was right. Yeah, I didn't know how to do anything sober. I couldn't go to a Dodger game and come back sober. How do you fish and stay sober? How do you make love? Go to parties. Get on a plane. Stay on a plane. Eat a meal. For God's sakes, name me a meal you can eat without a drink. Jesus, you know, there gotta be, you know. But he said AA would teach me how to do that. And not because of his words, but because of what was on his face. I believed what he told me was true. He showed me by his face that what the life he was leading was worth living. That the life he was leading was what I wanted back. And so I was willing to go to church basements, and I was willing to shake hands with people who I didn't want to meet. And I had that dichotomy that happens to most of us, you know, where inside my gut I know I need AA to get the love of life, but on the outside I got a chip about a block long. Because I've lost the only friend I have, Gin. Gin was a very unrequited love affair, but as you absent yourself from, people come to me and say, Fish, boy, are you lucky. God, you're not drinking. Don't you feel great? I said, did you ever drink in your life? Well, yeah, I'm a heavy drinker. And I said, well, if you're a heavy drinker, you know it's getting sober that one should drink again. You know, reality sucks. I don't want anything. I hate this, you know. they'd say, no, no, you can't. And I'd say, yes. And they'd say, Fisher, you're looking better. And I'd say, I don't know. I don't want it, you know. I'm just dragging. And kept running around to meetings, and nothing seemingly was going right. And yet, in a way, it was. I'd met into some guys who just grabbed me real quick. And when Ellen, my wife, had come up after about 2 weeks of this place up at Duffy's, and she came up to a week just to visit, just to see if I was still alive. Because her father, when he tried to withdraw one time, OD'd, just, had his last convulsion and died in it, what happens to a lot of us. And so she was convinced that I was going to die of a convulsion, and much, if anything, just to relieve her mind, and yet in a way she wanted me to die too, but not of a, the pillow was what she wanted, and that was a more righteous way, but she came up and we began to talk, and there was maybe a hope, that old thing that we had was there, and that we truly still had great care for each other, and it was a good weekend, and I was still a space cadet, of course, and stayed a space cadet till this very day. But I mean, I was really a space cadet then, and Duffy grabbed her late that Sunday and said, "Look, Ellen," he says, "when you go back," he says, "this guy is very, he is so full of remorse and moroseness. He'll make angels cry, for God's sake." He said, "Get him to the Palm Springs Roundup. He'll be sober 37 days, and he's got to see this fun in AA. And you just go there." And this is the middle of May of 1981. And Ellen said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Duff," anything he said. So she went down. That next day, she called this lady, Elsie Fay, and says, and that thing usually got sold out like in February or March. She called and says, "I'd like 3 tickets to your Palm Springs Roundup." And Elsie Fay says, "Isn't that amazing?" She says, "We just had 3 cancellations. Yeah, you and your husband and his buddy can go. And one more time." And everyone, and we went. We owed the world, but thank God for Ellen's mother. She bailed us out. She was the last person in the world to bail us out, and at least bailed us out as far as the mortgage was concerned and the foreclosure. And everyone else went over there on Friday and stayed at the Riviera or somewhere. And, we didn't have any dough, so we went over on Saturday and stayed at the Happy Hooker Travel Lodge, And we went to this family meeting, and it was wonderful. And I was still coming off the sauce, and I was weird, and I'd sleep a lot and scratch in weird places. But an AA speaker stood up by the name of Hank J., and he used to live down here, and just a marvelous guy. And he was funny, and people around me were laughing, and I hadn't laughed in a long time. And he was a salesman, and I began to identify with him, and I began to laugh with him. And finally, towards the end, I was really laughing, and I hadn't done that in so long. I just felt good, and then one of those odd things, and we have a guy in our group who says, "Is it odd or is it God?" But this Ellen had gone to the Mason and Lassen Friday night meeting, which is the meeting that Ed and I usually go to, and she had never been to that meeting, knew not a soul in that meeting. I was sober at that time 1 week, and she went to that speaker meeting, and she met the only gal she knew from years before at the Broadway. And
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And she was an alcoholic, and she met Ellen, and they chatted for a few minutes. A guy by the name of Jimmy Grennan walked by, and this gal says, "Hey, Jimmy, meet Ellen. Her husband's up at your buddy's place." And Jimmy says, "Hi, how are you? And when's he due out?" She told him, and that was the end of the conversation. Jimmy went off to work with newcomers, and here it is. We're now a month later, and we're at this Palm Springs Roundup, and Hank J. has just finished speaking, and I'm on line for water, and this guy, Jimmy Grennan, comes up to Ellen and says, "Hey, that husband of yours out of Duffy's yet, "Yeah, he's over there in line for water, Jim." He says, "Hi, I'm Jim. I'm the yo-yo champ. You're on the wrong line for water. Come follow me, And I did. For the next few months, I just followed that guy wherever he went, And he was just great for me, He'd come up to me on a Friday night and say, "Fish, AA will fail if you and Tom don't help us tomorrow move people." "Jeez, we don't want AA to fail, God, but we'll be there." And so we'd go on moves with it. It never dawned on us that, what they do is they'd give us things we couldn't break. They'd give us Scott toweling and toilet paper. That's all we ever carried, And they'd feed us lunch, and they'd take us home, and then they'd pick us up an hour later and take us to a meeting. They kept us tired. That's what they did, One night, Jimmy had said, "Fish," he says, "Look, I'm speaking over on Sepulveda." He says, I want you to come, but I want you to invite your wife to come with us, and if she'd like to, as a date night. And I said, "Okay, Jim." I said, "Where's the meeting?" He said, "Well, it's at the Alpha Beta." I said, "Well, we're in the Alpha Beta." He says, "Well, you can pass the fruits and turn right at the cabbages." And I'm right there. And I said, "Oh, okay, Jim." And I went in. I said, "Ellen, Jimmy Grennan has asked me to ask you if you would have a date with me tonight and go hear him speak at the Alpha Beta. She said, sure, I'd love to. The Alpha Beta? I said, yeah. She said, where in the Alpha Beta? I said, well, we go past the fruit to the cabbages, turn right. And sure enough, we got there, and we did, and there it was. It was the training room for Alpha Beta there on Sepulveda. It was a meeting that lasted very long. I used to have people there. I said, well, why do you meet here? And she said, oh, it's easy. We can shop and go to a meeting at the same time. Crazy, crazy life, you know. He finally led me to where I found a sponsor, and the sponsor got me into phones, and then it's H&I. And next to sponsorship, I think H&I is the greatest gift we have in AA, you know. Sponsorship, of course, has its own blessings, but H&I does something that I think is peculiar, and at least for me, and keeps me alive and well, and that is that, you know, I do not forget my last drunk, and I certainly don't forget that first year of getting sober. It was the worst year of my life, for God's sakes. You know, it was terrible. I never want to go through that again, ever. God, you know, it was just, and you know, but I have a memory like most of us that's going to forget. I know what's going to happen. It's going to forget unless I do certain things. And that some of the certain things to stay in a fit spiritual condition for this character is to be involved with H&I. Because when I go to a hospital or a jail or just anywhere where there's new people, I can taste and smell and feel exactly the way I felt when I was new. You know, that pain and that anger, and at the same time that hope, you know, and can it work, and will it work this time, you know. And I don't ever want to forget that. I never want to forget that feeling, you know. It's terrible. And H&I just gives that to all of us for free. And yet in most H&I meetings we have to beg people to take a panel, you know, which has always struck me funny. One time, going up to a panel, I had a panel at Acton for a lot of years, and I don't have time to go in. Well, Jimmy had told me years ago, he said, Fish, you've had that panel too long. He says, after 4 years, you should give up that panel and get another one. And I said, Jim, I respect you in all things you say. I said, but I'm just the bus driver. I hardly even share at this meeting. And I said, I just like driving you all up here and the different people and then driving you back. It's a nice commitment. It's a nice Sunday afternoon, and I don't see where keeping it any length of time is anything. He says, Fish, you're getting ownership. He said, the last thing an alcoholic needs is ownership. I said, I don't feel ownership, Jim. You're absolutely wrong. 6 years later, another group took over that meeting and took it away from me. God, I want to kill. If I'd had an Uzi, that whole H&I panel up in Palmdale would have been wiped out. There would have been a funeral for 37 alcoholics, you know, mass grave. You know. God, did I have ownership, you know. So once again, Jimmy was right. But that's one particular trip we're going up, and Jim's in the front seat because he has more sobriety, and two guys in the back, big tall guy named Jeff, who was about 20 years old, but about 6'5". And I'd known Jeff for about 3 years. That was about the length of his sobriety. Another guy whose name I forget to this moment. But anyway, we're driving up there, and we have a nice meeting on the way up, and those three put on a good meeting at Acton. And then we start heading back, and Jimmy says to Jeff, he says, hey, Jeff, you're too big for the back seat. You get up in front with Fish. And so Jeff says, hey, thank you very much, Jim. Now, what Jeff didn't know, or I didn't know, was Jimmy wanted to work on the other guy in the back seat, you know, just ban him, rooster him to death, you know. And so Jeff and I are driving down. I said, Jeff, I said, you sound real good. I said, how are things going? He says, pretty good, Fish. I said, I hear a little bit of hesitation. I said, what's wrong? You got a problem? He says, yeah. I said, what is it? Socks. I said, socks? I said, what's the problem with socks? He said, 2, 3 wearings, and I got to buy a new pair of socks. I said, where do you buy your socks? He said, Sears, Pennies. I said, that's a good place for socks. That's where I buy my socks. I said, what size do you buy? He said, size? He says, socks come in sizes, you know? Here he was, a 15 shoe wearing size 12 socks, you know? You know, and the reason I always remember that story and never want to forget it, and why I pass it on is, you know, this is a spiritual path we take, and it's a spiritual program, but God darn, let's make sure they're in the right pair of socks, you know, you know, it's kind of hard to trudge if your toes going through the heel of your sock, the whole of your sock all the time, you know. Funny. Belonged to the San Fernando group, and the San Fernando group's an old group. Only in AA, and the San Fernando group is now in Sylmar. Still the San Fernando group, who cares? You know, we don't care, you know. And we used to be known as the resentment group. And the reason was because we used to have breakfast every other Sunday. Well, you think about it. You know, there isn't a calendar. Not even in AA is there a calendar that says, is this the other Sunday? I don't know. How do you know what the other Sunday is? Don't laugh. It's like an H&I. The first thing we got to tell people is, look, the first thing you got to get is a calendar. And we said, why? He said, well, a lot of times the third Thursday is before the third Tuesday. No, it can't be. Yes, it can. Don't worry about it. Just get a calendar, you know. So anyway, so my sponsor said to these guys, they said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to have breakfast every Sunday. And they took a lot of business meetings, and they finally agreed to have it. And so we cook. We still cook there, the first Sunday of each month. And it's a good group, and we have a lot of fun. And we bring a lot of young guys with us. And we need about 4 to cook. We try to get 15 just to make it easier and have more fun. And we love it when newcomers come in. Valium vodka guys are the best because they can go potatoes quickly. Man, can they do potatoes? They go without even the knife moving. You know, it's just nicely diced. You know, it's wonderful. So you don't need Valium vodka people, just send them to our group, you know. They're good for 3 months. They really are. It's wonderful. We teach them all kinds of songs, and especially the young guys, because a lot of the guys don't know songs. You know, what they know are words songs that never had words, you know, just you know, and whatever it is. But so we teach them some songs. One of the songs they have to learn is Zippity Doo Dah. And it's true though. Everyone laughs. Zippity Doo Dah has 3 great lines for an alcoholic. And it's towards the end of the song where it says it's right, it's actual, everything's satisfactual. You know, and I think, at least I do, and I know the people that I hang around with, we forget, you know, that when I walked in that door of AA and someone says, hey, Fish, I'm going to make life satisfactual for you. God, inside I'd say you can't. It can never be satisfactual. It just can't be. And yet it is. And yet that's not enough. And I would have sold my soul for satisfaction. Would have sold my soul for satisfaction. You know. And I don't mean it's not enough anymore without paying the price. I mean it's not enough anymore because I'm not willing to do the things that really make life satisfaction. You know, I'm not willing to do those things that, when I took my first year cake, my sponsor says, Bob, how many commitments you got? And I told him, which was a strange question because he had given me all those commitments. And he says, I don't think you can take a second birthday with any fewer. Oh, how do you know I was going to drop 2 of them? You know. He said, matter of fact, Fish, he says, my experience is you're going to have to do more. Oh, I'm sure sorry to hear that. You know, I'm not going to tell him these things, but that's going on in here. You know. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is because I think that's typical of all stupid alcoholics, you know, is we get it and it ain't enough, you know, and I want more. And, you know, and I want more of life. But I know from my own experience that I'm a great one gatherer. We all are. We're great gatherers of one. I know when things hit the fan, I'm supposed to call people or run to a meeting, but I don't. You know, I'll invariably either figuratively or actually just hit the bed, you know, and pull the covers over my head and pout for a while, you know. And then I'll eventually reach a place where it's either go to a meeting or commit suicide. So I'll have to flip a coin, you know. Oh, crap, meeting 1, you know. You know, if I go to a meeting, you know, and invariably, within a few minutes, I tell someone this terrible story that was going to be the end of my life, and the guy slaps me on the back and says, oh, yeah, that happened. You know, it becomes real easy, you know, and that's how AA works, you know, because wherever 2 or more are gathered, you know. But being a one gatherer, I've got to be careful. I got to be careful. And because I'm gathering with the only enemy I got. The only enemy I got is me. The only thirsty brain that I know in this world that I'm attached to is mine. And my brain, I believe, will stay thirsty till I die. The craving to drink has long since left me, but I know it's a thirsty brain. I just know it is, you know. And so we were trying to think while we were doing all this cooking, a song that spoke to the alcoholic, male or female, drunk or sober, what one song describes that type of the alcoholic. And we couldn't think of one, so we made one up, and it goes like this. I, me, 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 me. I, me, me, I, me, me, I, me, me, I, me, myself, and I. And that's the alcoholic song, you know. And, no, don't clap. The reason I hesitated was, you know, a bunch of my friends get down to Mexico, and they have some property down there, and they have the AA group, and of course the I song in Spanish is yo, 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 I mean, through the whole thing, you know. Which is how Jimmy Grennan introduced himself to me. He says, hi, I'm the yo-yo champ, which meant he was up and down all the time, you know. And so there we are. I unfortunately have a sponsor who heard Cecil from Canada, and I say that unfortunately because old Cecil always tells his grandmother's prayer, which is, "Dear God, may I be treated tomorrow as I treated everybody else today." And my sponsor heard that prayer. You know, and so he came back and he said, "Fish," he says, "I heard this great prayer." He says, "I say it every night." And I said, "Oh, sponsor, I'm dying to hear this prayer." Because we had reached a place in our lives where he no longer told me what to do. He would tell me what he was doing, and if he was doing it, he knew that I should do it. Now, if you have that kind of relationship with your sponsor, you got a good sponsor, you know. But anyway, so he says, "Oh, I'm dying to hear it, Dave." And he says, "Every night I say this prayer, 'Dear God, may I be treated tomorrow as I treat everyone else today.'" I said, "Dave, can I say that in the morning?" He says, why would you want to say it in the morning? I said, "I couldn't go to sleep if I said it at night, you know." I said, "What's that to do with alcoholism? I mean, I don't even see what that has anything to do with it." He said, "Well, Fish," he said, "it's certainly a good review of step 6 and 7. It's certainly the first half of step 10, and it's most assuredly step 11. He said, that's a great prayer, Fish." You know. So every night I say that prayer, "Dear God, may I be treated tomorrow as I treat everyone else today." Someday I have to say, "Dear God, may I be treated tomorrow as I treated my wife today. Dear God, may I be treated tomorrow as I treated my boss today." And it becomes an awareness to me. I don't want to be a saint. I'll never be a saint. But I don't want to keep score. I just want to stay out of people's faces. I just want my defects to kind of stay out of my life. Because as they poke their life in, then my love of life disappears. Then I begin to feel guilty or loaded down. And I don't want that anymore. I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't have to have it. The value of this program is it's optional. But the option is all mine. And, you know, I have a bad memory, and I came in and I told people, "Well, I came in to court too late, ho, ho, ho," and everybody laughed, you know. But it's not true. I've learned from my betters in AA that my bad memory is in direct proportion to how self-centered I am on any given day. If I'm into me that day, my memory sucks. If I'm living a good life like I did today, today was a good life. I remember everything about today. So I know what my bad memory is in direct proportion to. I know what it is. And yet, in spite of whatever kind of a day I have, whether I'm into me or just doing the good life, if I say that prayer like high-speed motion picture, my whole day goes drum. Now sometimes I don't like that drum, you know. I say, "Oh, playing God again." Now you don't want me to be God. I sure as hell don't want any of you to be God. But you don't want, if I was God, there'd be a scorched earth policy. That would be the first thing, you know. There'd be nobody on Lincoln Boulevard when I want to get here. And this hotel would have waterproof rugs. I mean, you know, I'm not going to do that, you know. But you don't want me to be God. I don't want you to be God. And yet, on a regular basis, I want to play God. And it's a terrible defect. You know, it just causes me great grief. When I let go and let God, my life's wonderful. I truly know what that means. I've experienced it. And yet, instead of my experience, I still want to take over. And taking over is not the answer. And so I need a regular basis. I had a hard problem with God. And I finally started talking to God out loud on the advice of someone else. And I'd always start off my conversations out loud to God by saying, "Thank you." And when I start talking to God out loud, I hear what's truly inside me. When I say too many of the thous and the thems is inside my head, I sound like Socrates. When I speak out loud to God, I hear a whimpering, pitiful child. A guy who just refuses to grow up, who wants to continue to play God, and who eventually will get so thirsty he'll drink again unless he gets out of his own way. And the only way I know to stay out of my own way is to stay amazed by this program. I'm coming to the end of my time. I think the first promise is in the sentence before. You know, when we talk about there'll be a new happiness, new freedom, I don't think that's the first promise. I think the first promise is where it says that if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, step 9, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through, because I'm still amazed by this program. I'm amazed at how well this program works in spite of me. I'm amazed at how well it works in spite of everybody. I'm amazed at how well this program exists. I'm amazed about the whole thing about this program. And as long as I'm amazed by it, then I can't take credit for it. As long as I stay amazed, I hope I'm only halfway through. May you be too. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.